Hello, good evening and welcome to VisioCare Vision, the webinar series brought to you by VisioCare Services, supported by our education partner, the Veterinary Edge. My name is Nikki and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined this evening by Alan. Hi, Alan.
Hi, Nikki. Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you too. I'd love to encourage everybody here this evening to get involved and use the chat box, which is on the right side of your screen. So why don't you pop in there now and say hello, let us know where you're joining us from, while I take a moment just to share with you a little bit about our presenter. So Alan Robinson has been a veterinary surgeon in practice for over 20 years. Consultants. His mission is reigniting purpose, passion, people and performance in independent veterinary practices. His company, Vet Dynamics, works with independent practices to provide personalised support and resources for practice performance, business intelligence, leadership and culture, and team engagement. Wow, amazing. Okay, Alan, well, thank you so much, like I say again, for joining us this evening, and I will hand over to you and I will see you on the other side.
Thanks, Nikki. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this, the third of our series on this leadership version, and thank you very much to VisioCare for sponsoring this, putting it up, making the effort to build this community. We've got 190 people registered. We may not get that many turning up, but apparently a lot of people follow this series on the replays and take it from there, and which I think is a tremendous effort, and it's actually very salient to the conversation this evening as we move on. So I would encourage people to reflect on what I've got to say. We are talking about how do we grow is the title. So we've looked at a couple of other things. We're now looking at the growth. This is asking for some shift and change in thinking in particular. We're sort of reviewing where we've come from COVID. We're reflecting on that, and now we're sort of rebuilding in some ways. So some of these things are stuff we're kind of doing. Other stuff is going to be a bit radically new. So if you've got comments or questions, please pop into the chat box. Nikki will pick those up and feed them back, and we'll cover those as we go. So hopefully we can make this a little bit of a conversation around what's possible and where we could and should be going. So let's jump into it and see how we go. Okay, hopefully you've got the PowerPoint up there. So like I said, this is part 3 of the series. This is how we grow, and you know, my contention here is that the veterinary business model is really not fit for purpose for the future. Particularly coming out of COVID, particularly coming out from the situation and the changes we've got there. So we're moving on to a new realm. So for this post-pandemic future, this is a chance to really look at 3 things. One is identity, this bit about who we are in terms of the client's perception, in terms of our business capability, particularly in concerns the people you're employing or trying to attract and recruit and retain, because identity is a very strong cultural builder for people. How it works, how we operate, how we can operate better, more efficiently. The thing about veterinary business model, it is just turgid is probably the best word. So much friction, so much difficult things take so much time, people take so much energy, and it's no wonder people reach their cognitive load very quickly, and we get burnout and anxiety and depression, other sorts of things. So those 2 things were sort of geared to drive anti-fragile, more flexible, organic changes, more interconnected. The whole point about this series, if you haven't noticed, and we're going to move on to this, is people are at the center of this model. So we're talking around this piece of how do we build a better business model for the future, and the primary driver is that how do we put people at the center of this equation and build it from there. So all these things are around that. Some of these models, as I said, don't fit today's model. They are very different, and they are different, what we call a paradigm or a way of thinking or a view of the world, comes from a long tradition of veterinary practice, which, like I say, is now no longer suitable for purpose. So we need to move on to things and involve more open-mindedness, growth mindset, creativity, speed, accountability. A lot of stuff you hear in the leadership world, but I'm trying to put into a framework that works. So two things: we're either going to fix some stuff and make it better, or we're going to radically change it and replace some of that stuff as we go. So purpose, values, culture, the building blocks of identity. Purpose is why we're here. Values is what do we need to do and believe in. And culture is how we actually act in the world. And that sense of identity and purpose is really attractive to recruiting people, recruiting vets and nurses, which is kind of our prime thing, and retaining those people as well. How we operate is very much around the way people have autonomy and exercise that purpose within your business. Are they involved in decision making? Are those decisions proximal to where those decisions have an impact? Are people involved with that? Is it quick enough, or is it just this slow process of making anything ever getting done? What drives that is structure. What's your meeting structure? What's your communication structure? What's the hierarchy of your business? Have you got a person at the top and then the typical pyramid of blockages and things, or is it much more holistic than that? And of course, then those things release talent, and release talent by actually attracting the best people we can, retaining the best people we've got, and then developing those people to be really productive and useful in your business. Now, if you've got that far and you've listened to the first two videos, or if you haven't, you can certainly go back to VisioCare website and have another look at those. You will be doing really well in the future, because these are the key things that we feel, and there's others for sure, these things that will really make a difference. So if you got that far, that's good. What I want to move on to tonight is, if we've got that, do we want to grow is one question. Maybe, maybe not, but we all are in some sort of growth progression. We're not going to stand still. And of course, we've had massive change, so we're going to have to grow into that change. So key things we're going to look at here is something called ecosystems. We touched on this when we went to structure. It's around who's the relationships, who's the communities you're involved with that will take you forward for the future. And I'll sort of move on that. Second thing is, how do we engage with technology? And this isn't about technology for technology's sake. It's not about apps. It's not about PMS systems. It's around how can we make things more efficient, effective, smoother, and frictionless. Okay, that's the bit that really technology can deliver. It can take friction from the system, though it does have its problems. And the last thing is another paradigm shift in thinking. It's turning your business from a production transactional based process into a learning organization. Again, not focusing on the profit or the clinical, though that's important. What we're doing is developing people to release that talent. So that's what we call a learning organization. And that's what we're going to be moving into. So again, like I said, if that's, use the right technology here on. Okay, so let's look at that then. So how do we grow? And the key principle is here, growth is about scale. It's actually having your business, and you might have experienced this, when there's just one vet, one nurse, one receptionist, you have a very close-knit thing. As soon as you go to 2 vets, you lose some of that cohesion. As soon as you go to 3 or 4 vets and a lot of other people, businesses tend to get difficult to run. You lose communication, you lose the easiness of it. And then certainly when you get to really bigger practices, 40, 50 or more people, you need systems and processes. But what scale allows you to do is take those systems and they grow into that and remain nimble. You've got to constantly adapt, etc. Now, to do that, it's how we manage the interactions across the board, and that's externally from clients, stakeholders, other people interested in business, your employees certainly within that. And then within this, I'm going to suggest that technology has a key part to play within this. So rather than growth, think about scale. How can we sort of make this expand in proportion to itself in each other, if that's what you want to do? The other case of growth is, how do you grow as a human being? How do you grow your team? How do you grow the personal and professional capabilities in this team as well? So growth and scale comes from three things. It's harnessing ecosystems of partners. So this is looking outside of the solid walls of your business and saying, where do I interact with other businesses? So being on this webinar, you're interacting with the community that VisioCare has built around this. And although you're not directly communicating with them, there will be some interaction. I'm the conduit of that at the moment, okay? So this is an example of an ecosystem crossing over to your ecosystem. Now we're going to explore that, and what I want to think about there is, what does your ecosystem, or what could your ecosystem look like in the future? Second thing is, how do we engage with technology, okay? And I've sort of said building data-rich technology platforms, because data is the raw ones and zeros of daily life, and we all deal with data every day. Even if you're in a small practice that you look at the bank account, see if you've got any money in, you look at the appointment diary, see how busy you are, you talk to your nurse and see what's happening out the back. That's data. That you're collecting data and making decisions on that. And in that second bit, we talked about how do we make decisions quicker, faster, more efficiently? And data is the feed for that, okay? But it's not just about technology. It's that where do we get data from? And of course, the danger is we don't want data overload. We want curated data that's coming in that is decision worthy. And the third thing, as I said, taking that data, taking that ecosystem, that is interactions, this suddenly puts us in a situation of accelerated learning if we so choose. And of course, that's the fuel that drives your talent engine for people to develop, get better at what they do. And don't forget the three things we talked about: intrinsic motivators, people living in purpose, people living with autonomy and choice, people living in mastery of what they're doing, getting better, and that's the learning process. And of course, within that community of what we're talking about. Okay, a little bit of an aside. I was on holiday recently, which was very nice. I read this book. I don't know if anyone's read it. This is Merlin Sheldrake. He's the brother of Cosmo Sheldrake, the musician, the son of Rupert Sheldrake, the actor and author. And Merlin is a author. He's an ecologist. He's a biologist, and he's a mycologist. And he looks at fungi, basically, is what he's at. This is a really interesting and stunning book, and what it talks about is how trees, plants, the ecosystem generally, the plant-based ecosystem, is totally interconnected underneath the ground through mycelial networks. And fungi, or the mushrooms we see, are only the fruiting bodies of a massive network of communication between trees. And this is real communication between trees and plants and other things. It's a stunning read, and I recommend any of you interested in this to read this. Now, what this fungi does, what these mycelial networks do, trees support each other. So if you have a tree and have a tree near it that's struggling, not getting enough water, the mycelial network will redirect nutrients and fluids and water to that tree to help it grow. They will act as protective mechanisms for other trees. They will support their own, obviously, genetic offspring as growth, even to the point, if a tree is being attacked by disease or predators, and of course all plants have their own defense mechanisms. They put out certain chemicals and things. What the mycelial network will pick up on that and feed that information to neighboring trees. So those neighboring trees are actually putting out the defense mechanisms before the predators actually arrive at the tree. And it really is quite a stunning understanding of how networks power success, okay, for this. And of course, what we do know in the ecological world, we are disrupting those networks massively through the way we're managing forests and trees. So I won't get into that one particularly. But this is a really nice metaphor for networks, ecosystems, and systems thinking within this. So if you like a good read, I'd highly recommend it from there. But let's take the metaphor back into what we're trying to talk about here. This ecosystem view, network view, interconnectivity view is really important for success, okay? So what we're asking here is organizations where is disrupting where the boundaries lie. So if you think of a tree, it's got the crown, it's got the trunk, it's got the roots, but that tree doesn't end there. It just massively infiltrates for, hundreds of yards away from that. I think the largest mycelial network is somewhere in America, and something like 140 square kilometers of the same network supporting the forest and trees there. So they can be huge. What we're talking about here is, like I said, a shift of thinking away from the traditional hierarchical command and control systems of leverage and controlling everything and having solid walls to your business. This is where I end, this is where everyone else, so it's us and them thinking is really what we're trying to get past here, and really starting to incorporate who else can support me, who else can I support? How do we build that network around that? Okay, so the value is created through networks, and this is where we share data, experience, code, skills, and all sorts of things. And this is going to become really important for the future, and I would say for the veterinary profession in particular, because our profession is very much on its knees, and we need quite a dynamic new way of thinking about supporting and helping each other. And it goes beyond just welfare and resilience and a few yoga mats in the back room. This is building communities of business that create value and what we call anti-fragility. So we're supporting each other. Typical thing, I mean, if a neighboring practice has some bad luck, loses a vet, and we saw this all the way through COVID, was it a little yeehaw, look at that, great for us, too bad for them? Or was there actually an empathy that said, hey, that could happen to us, how can we support these people? I didn't hear too many of those comments as I went on, but believe me, that's probably what's going to be required as we go. So I've mentioned this in one of the others, this Albert Laszlo Barabasi. He's a network scientist, basically, probably one of the leading network scientists in the world. He wrote a book called The Formula, and again, it's another piece of work I'd suggest you have a look at. But in his rules of success in this formula, stated that performance, anything you can measure and get good at and then put a number to, like KPIs and other stuff, is performance is bound by skills. So you can only be such a good surgeon. You can only be as see so many clients. You can only actually do so many operations. All these things are measured, and then therefore skills are limited. You can only get so good. Okay, so you could be the best orthopedic surgeon in the world, but if you don't have clients or a network or support people, you really can perform well, but you can't succeed well. Success, he says, is bound by networks. It's the size and interconnectivity of your network that makes the difference to success. And in the book, he lists people who are really good at what they do, but no one's ever heard of them. The Red Baron wasn't the best fighter pilot in World War I. Okay, he was just the most noticeable and got the most success. Okay, so networks are unlimited. They can take you really as far as you want to go. So that's just an important thing to think about. I only mention that because in the veterinary world, performance, skill-based is honored. It's kind of what we go for. I want to get better and better at. But somewhere within that, we need to be building a network, an ecosystem within which our business can succeed on that. Just a couple of examples. So Tesla is probably the most successful company in the world at the moment, certainly the most successful car company in the world. And way back 6 years ago, what they decided to do is open source its patents and other things for its batteries, for its way of working. They made this freely available to its competitors. And they opened up its intellectual property, unheard of in the world of motor cars and particularly, etc. But what Elon was particularly good at, if anything, he recognized he couldn't grow without partners, because an electric car without infrastructure is dead in the water, basically, without the charging station, without the services, without the servicing, without the other things. So he shared that. And so other people went out and built infrastructure to support his vehicles, and that was really given it the scope and capability. And of course, they fed back into that open source of new ideas and development, etc. So it put itself at the center of this ecosystem of partners. And what I'm suggesting here to you guys, think about how can you think about an ecosystem of partners. Okay, the groundwork gave them really most of their success from that perspective. Amazon's another company, and whatever you think of any of these companies is beside the point. I'm talking about the business view of it. Amazon hugely successful, no need to say that. They have this huge network, and if there is a networked organization, it's Amazon. Where they failed, or where they found it most difficult, was that last mile delivery, getting the product into a warehouse and then getting it from there to your front door in the time capable. So rather than them build that person by person, van by van network, they offered employees $10,000 and 3 months pay, and deals on leasing vans and the training to go and set up their own businesses, to do that last mile delivery. They have no part of that business. They're fully self-contained businesses, all the licensing done. So they actually deliver that for them. So these delivery system partners, self-employed, but Amazon cannot work without them. These are the mycelial network that Amazon needs to be successful, because without them, the business wouldn't work. Without Amazon, these guys wouldn't have a job, and girls wouldn't have a job. And it's given people purpose, autonomy, mastery, money, community. And I know most of these Amazon delivery guys because they turn up here about 3 times a day. So again, it's thinking around, where's the extension? What's the blockages here? Where can we do? And when it's not asking, how do I do this? It's asking, who can do this? That is really the trick to this as we go on. So thinking about this ecosystem, we're moving away from transactional, win-lose, it's mine, I'm winning, I'm better than you, competitive, in that way, to collaborative and community-based systems, to embrace partnerships, and looking at how can you be successful, how can I be successful? If we're both successful, we're probably both going to be more successful than one of us trying to beat the other one. Hope that makes some sense. What I'm thinking, is there any examples of that people can think of currently in business? Are people seeing those partnerships? I'm thinking your referral network, maybe your after hours network, maybe your locum network, maybe your pharmaceuticals companies, wholesalers, VisioCare, as I say, they're certainly, and the way you define a partner is to say, how good is their community? How good is their network with others? Because it's not the one individual you want to connect, you want to connect to a community. Now, I know some of you belong to mastermind schemes so we now Vet Dynamics Platinum and Mastermind, they're communities, the bigger Vet Dynamics community, people engage, and that provides some level of resource and development for people. Some people step out of the veterinary profession and go to other levels of things. So start looking for those community networks to tie into. That's really the thing you want to be looking into from there. We looked at this internally, and if you remember, we talked about, let's move away from the hierarchy, who's the boss, who's the managers, who's the people doing the work, etc., in a fairly linear fashion. That's the limitation. That's where performance is going to be limited, to a much more what we call holocratic organization, where it's teams of people, project-based, interacting with each other, and people belonging to multiple teams. So that's the internal piece. What I'm suggesting externally, where's the crossover with other businesses, communities? And it should just be an ever-expanding Venn diagram of multiple connections as we go. As some of you know, we're involved with Harper Keele University building, helping construct their first opinion emergency critical care teaching hospital in the university, which is a project we've picked up sort of March, April, May last year, through failure of a community to deliver, the opportunity of being in a community that got us into this. Harper Keele were let down on their first round of this. It was picked up by another network that also failed, and so we sort of stepped in and with this. Now, there's no way I can build a first opinion veterinary teaching hospital with even the other people I'm involved with. It's not going to happen. But because I am in multiple networks, we found some people who do business innovation, design and innovation. They've stepped in and they're doing a fantastic job. We were let down by the builders and the contractors who were meant to be there. But because we had a good relationship in a community with our architects, they've introduced us to their network of contractors. So all this stuff, which seems like serendipity and just magic in some ways, is the pure power of networks. And I'm sure all of you have some sort of experience of that. And yeah, it's true, isn't it? It's who you know is really important part of this. Okay, so just to round that piece off, successful companies blurring the boundaries, not looking at the solid walls, taking a systems view, these overlapping Venn diagrams of other people, communities. And then how fluid can you be within that? And that's not like giving away all your secrets or money or anything else. It's mutual cooperation, collaboration is really what we're looking for. So these partners become an extension of your business in something that you can't do. And one of our horses stuck its lip on a nail and ripped its top lip off the other night, which is fairly messy business, blood everywhere, etc. It was 10 o'clock Sunday night. Called the local vet. They were on their knees. They were busy. They're down to one vet. They're struggling. We said, okay, and they sort of couldn't come out to the morning. Rang the other practice that the other horses use, but they have a night service. I can't remember what they're called, but it's separate from that. So it's this interconnectivity. Those vets could go home, finish their day, have a glass of wine, see their family, etc., because they pass out. So it's like using an emergency after our service. But the vet that came out works weekends, works nights, perfectly happy to come out. He gets paid if he does the work. Yeah, exceptionally nice guy. Did the job, came out, and it wasn't that expensive, I must say, for horses. Take that as you like. So again, it's these partners. So what I want you to do, just quickly on a piece of paper, start mapping out who your ecosystem could or should be in terms of trust and mutual dependence and shared value. So I'm thinking, what's the pharmaceutical companies now? A lot of them are sort of pushing for communities of practice, communities of value. Wholesalers, some of them certainly doing that. PMS companies are trying to get more people involved. Now, not all of them are doing this particularly well. Service providers, like I said, VisioCare, etc. Even how can you bring clients into that ecosystem? Okay, that might frighten some of you. Or have you got ecosystems outside the profession that you rely on? Of course, there's the Vet Dynamics network and that side of it as well to consider. So just start mapping that out. It's a thinking process, and it's really quite interesting how far that exercise can take you with that. Okay, so that's ecosystems. Hopefully that's sort of giving you a bit of a brief on that. Second thing is technology platforms, okay? Ways and means of curating data. Like I said, you all curate data day in, day out anyway. You're taking stuff in. Now, it's usually ad hoc, it's usually subjective, and it's usually not validated, or you might have systems. Obviously, your accounting system, you might have some sort of dashboard or PMS system that you're looking at, and it's reporting generally around what has happened in the past, or it might answer a specific, how many consultations done, how much product have we bought, etc. So what we're suggesting here is engaging with technology as best you can, and that's not recording stuff, but also communications technology, your apps for communicating with clients, your educational platforms, etc. with this, and putting data front and center in this particular. But it's data isn't replacing people. Data is informing decisions. And remember, we talked about earlier, decisions is what will drive people and release talent. And it will also inform whether your value agenda is being honored. Okay, is what you're coming away with. That's what we're looking for, is how can we use this? Nikki, you popped in. Is there some comments?
Hi there. Yeah, I just have a question from Julie Hutton here, and she wants to know, when does an ecosystem become a monopoly?
Okay, when trust and mutual, well, the short answer for that, a really good question, as you say, and this is that sort of, dare I say, a little bit paranoid worry of all these things of sharing, and it's not something we do particularly well in the veterinary profession. Some places we do, other places not. When you say a monopoly, as in a controlling, even dare use the word corporate type of arrangement, etc., it's where you maintain autonomy and purpose for yourself, which is why that first piece is so important. What is your purpose? What is your values, and what is your culture driving this? And that's what the thing that holds you separate from this. You don't subsidize your values when you go into an arrangement with another person. It's a bit like a marriage, okay? You've all got to contribute equally and fairly, and you maintain your separate identities, but together you're stronger and work better and bring up the kids and pay for the horses, that sort of thing, okay? So a monopoly is when you've capitulated and you've actually gone into it, and there's a lack of trust and a lack of mutuality coming out of it. Is the best way I can say that. And you know, if you are building relationships, you go into some and you just don't get it right. You get it very wrong in some cases. It's like you got to kiss a few frogs before you find the prince. So go into these things with circumspection, go into these things with care. But if you get it right, and the best way I could say of actually entering something like that is a values match. Have that discussion of, tell me about your purpose, tell me about your identity, tell me about your values and culture. And if you get the resonance from that discussion, you're probably on the right track. And we've had to do a lot of that in this project we're doing at Kiel. And we do a lot of it with Vet Dynamics. We're constantly engaging with partners on various levels and internationally, etc. So it's not an easy one, but it's something you can test that way. So hopefully that was useful in that. So like I said, these data-rich platforms, just a quick example, Netflix, I think most of you would have some sort of association with Netflix, was kind of the blockbusters in America. They would put a DVD in an envelope and send it out to you. You'd go into the shop, pick up a DVD and swap it around that way. Of course, that world changed dramatically, went online, changed completely, and lots of companies did that. Blockbusters didn't do it very well. They went bankrupt and disappeared from the planet because they wouldn't keep up. Other companies did live streaming, but Netflix kind of won the game. There was lots and lots of competition in the early days. And what won the game is their use of data, and what their success now is based on, that nearly 75% of what people actually engage with on Netflix is what Netflix tells them to engage with, okay? It's through the recommendation algorithm that says, you might like this. Yeah, that's it. And if you notice on Amazon, they do the same thing. Other people that bought this. What do you think? And it just drives the business. Now, you might take that as manipulative for sure, but it does drive success through data and through network are the two things at play here on that. So just to give technology a little bit of perspective, Nikki, you're back.
I am back again, and referring back to the ecosystem slide, yeah, sure. Alan, Christian's asked a fantastic question. What are the most important values of an ecosystem for our animal clients? It's obviously something that's really spurred some interest.
Just ask the question again.
What are the most important values of an ecosystem for our animal clients?
So, Christian, you might want to just help me with this a bit. Are we talking about what's important to our clients if we're going to include them in an ecosystem as part of this? Is that the question? And I would put to be honest, I'd put the question back to you. What do you think they are? And obviously, openness, transparency, being good at what you do. I mean, we do have data on what being good at veterinary medicine. People are expecting you to know what you're doing. But compassion, care, etc. There's a list of them. They all seem to start with C in some shape or form. And when you get the value set right with people, involve them in this, and a lot of it, communication's another one, listening to people. When you're dealing with people, basic human values seem to work best. But I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, Christian, as well as I'd like. Do you want to just clarify that a little bit, Nikki? If we do get that clarity, we'll jump on that one at the end and see if we can refine this. But my pushback to the group. If someone would like to put in their values that they would espouse to their clients in the chat box, let's see what comes up. Put a couple each, because it'll be interesting. I would almost guarantee we'll get a lot of crossover, because these are innate ones that we drive each day of our working life. And it's not for me to dictate them, it's for you to choose them and live them. Hope that helps. Okay, so just putting technology in some sort of context. Technology is that force which takes something scarce and makes it more abundant. Okay, basically it needs to be scalable. We talked about growth in terms of scale earlier. Accessible, so more people can get use of it or get value from it. And of course, it's got to be affordable. It should bring the cost of delivery down rather than anything else. So my question here, what are the scarce resources you're currently struggling with? What are the things that you need more of as a result of COVID in your current business? And number one, I need a vet is going to be the short answer, or talent, or people in the business is certainly one. But technology can still help with that. But I would say your scarce resources are time, I'm just too busy; energy, I'm just worn out; people, etc., and possibly equipment or skills. Skills might be the other one. I just don't have the right people doing the right job. And now, technology is not going to replace it. It's not going to replace people, but you can use the people you got more scalable. Okay, you can make them more accessible. You can actually get them to work better. So just remote consulting. When there's, I know there's questions around that, but when you are absolutely busy, someone actually can do triage. I'm saying, clinical consulting, but triage, follow-ups, and all that stuff much more efficiently online, whether they like doing it or not, it's a whole nother matter. Is something we can actually do with technology. We can use the communication apps, so actually people are asynchronously texting us. We don't have to respond to the tyranny of the phone ringing if we've actually put it on a text-based system, because we can respond in our own time and make that our time then much more scalable and accessible, etc. And even things like mental health and emotional well-being and human thriving will be enhanced and helped through technology, okay, of actually giving people awareness of things that are going on, wearables in different ways, working on how people are working in the business, etc. So technology is a force. It needs to be used wisely, and needs to be built into the system. Okay, so since COVID and over the past 8, we've just had a mass of options come through. Okay, now that is confusing. That is difficult to curate, and most of you just don't have time to figure it out. Now, some of you have figured it out. You've punted for the easy ones, or the better ones, or the ones that work for you, or you had to try 3 or 4 before it worked out. I understand that, and I take that on. The point is, most veterinary technology has not been geared from a people-centric point of view, like most things. And again, PMSs are guilty of this as well. So what I have seen, and this is my reflection of people using technology well throughout COVID and coming out of COVID and reusing it, because it creates slight distance between you and the client, less so between you and the pet, but it actually combines you more with the team. We've seen that the inbuilt paradoxes and dilemmas of the consultation process, of the dealing with clients, and I've listed in there convenience versus clinical efficiency. I want this stuff done, but it needs to be done conveniently, easy for the client. Technology has helped smooth that with social distancing. So compassion and compliance. I've got to feel, people got to feel the empathy, but also you want people to comply with what you've recommended. Getting paid, basically making recommendations, putting paywalls up front so people aren't engaged. People don't have to talk about money because it's being invoiced online. And then the compassion piece. I'm able to look after myself as a vet. Equally, I can care for the pet, and the compassion is being delivered evenly rather than asynchronously to just the pet, and I'm burning out in the process. It's an observation, and there's a lot of detail built into that. What we've seen, and this was an interesting thing. We've actually instigating this at Keel, is these teams working together very well. And this is where the client comes back in, Christian. The client is part of this process. So we've got the vet doing the clinical work, the nurse looking after the patient, the concierge, receptionist, what do you want to call them, looking after the client, and the technology smoothing the process. So some of that technology is taking payment out of the equation, so that hasn't been having to deal with. Compliance is being done online through algorithms and texting and email delivery, etc. Compassion is better because multiple people are dealing with the client. The vet, the nurse, and the receptionist are all interacting through an app, etc. is what we've seen. And until you see it, then we get back to ecosystems. We've got an ecosystem of care working here much better. The necessary condition for this to work is not being too busy. So if you're trying to do this with massive numbers of clients, it won't work. So controlling client numbers is really important here. And technology, again, is a good way of doing this, putting in some filters. Basically, there is an excess amount of clients out there. There's no shortage, okay? You may want to limit that number coming in because you have a duty to look after your team. You might want to focus on your clients you've got at the moment and not take on any new ones. Or if you do take on new ones, make sure you're taking people who will comply and be better clients for you. And so the systems through preventative healthcare, insurance, and then technological communication can actually build a very nice filter of work. Now, when I say these things, I get a bit of kickback saying, well, are you excluding some people? And to be honest, you probably are, because if you just run with the altruism, I need to treat everybody and everything, you will burn your team very, very rapidly. And this is really asking the priority question, where does your duty lie, to the client or to your team? And it's a tough question, okay? But your team will help you answer that question, okay? And if they're performing well and doing well, they will turn up and do their best for as many clients as they can. But again, it's a performance-related thing. It is limited. The broader your network, the more you can do this, and technology is one of those network builders. So protecting the team, again, technology has a really useful piece here because it creates what I call a firewall between you and the client. It's not excluding them, leaving them in the car park, never facing them face to face. But most of the information that you need to impart can be put through, video consults, pre-op forms, emails, video consults, checkups, online videos for information, prepaying at booking, nurse texting after admissions and inpatient care, virtual payments. So again, this exercise with the horse the other night, the vet rang up, I'm happy to come out. I need £400 up front before I come out the door. And we said, fine. So we paid that online, boom, just sent through our thing, pressed the button, paid 400. He came out, did the job, separately, went home again. The bill came to 413. He emailed and said, it's 413. Are you happy for me to take the rest? Click, went. Okay, it's relatively painless apart from the 430, but it was a relatively painless process. No real contention. We weren't fighting it or anything else. Okay, and in fact, we thought it was damn good value, etc. So this again is a life protector, and what we've seen through COVID is people work better with less client interaction. However, what we have seen with some of the technology, client experience and client satisfaction has gone up paradoxically with that. Okay, so kind of things we're working towards here. How can we remove the friction from dealing with clients? And I talked about health schemes, insurance, and that's kind of subscription-based things. So rolling out that subscription-based healthcare, putting the money into another system outside of the consultation. It's paid in another way. Massive communication from all the team, and then invoking technology across all the platforms. So we actually reduce the amount of work to be able to make it frictionless is what's happening. When we put this into a couple of practices, and it's working remarkably well as we go on. Okay, technology is great, but it's got some problems, okay? We need governance, we need GDPR, we need all sorts of things, we need modular applications, we need applications built, we need to work on cloud-based technology, and of course there's needs budgeting, and it costs money, and if it's not saving money, it's costing you more money, etc. So that is the sort of key thing. So most of this work has to be done for you outside of your practice. So what we'd like to see is, again, ecosystems of technology coming together and talking to each other. So if there's anyone from technology companies, for God's sake, integrate with some of the PMS systems, because that's your biggest challenge. All this stuff is great, but it's another system, more complexity, more confusion, more logins, more passwords that people just don't want to deal with. So an integrated system is really what's important here. So although I'm making suggestion for technology, I'm also pulling back on that, saying, to be honest, it's just not there yet. It's getting there, it will get better, and there's systems in play at the moment that we know are coming along, will make a huge difference for this. Okay. So a little bit of tips here, something that might be useful. We've got a product in Veterinary called our Index. This might be of interest to some people. We're trying to deliver what's called prescriptive analytic data. So we talk about some data just reports what's happened, might even give you an idea of why it's happened. So if you can start to develop data that is starting to say, how can I make this happen again in the future? You have some control over that process to make that forward. So with the Index, if you want to have a look at that, go to vetdynamics.co.uk services and Index, and you get a free demo of what that data looks like. But it's driving this level of information. Some it's reporting of how I'm doing, some it's reporting how your clients are engaging, and some it's reporting on how your vets are performing, which is very useful predictive information. Again, it's a dashboard and it's benchmarking, etc. But I would suggest you go and have a look at that and see if that's of use to you. I'm sure we've got some people on the call who are using that. Okay, and the second little gift is, these are some partners of ours, part of our ecosystems, Veterinary IT Services. What I would suggest you do, go to resources.veterinaryit.services, and they have a massive free and available information, videos, checklists, workbooks for actually reviewing and upgrading your technology infrastructure. Lots of really good advice there. So that's free, available, and therefore happy for me to promote that, but you've got to find it there. So again, resources there. So take that as a starting point of what you're doing. Sort out what you've got at the moment. Okay, anything else, Nikki, at the moment? We okay? Seem to be. Okay, so we've got this far. We've kind of built a good, sorry, Nikki, we okay?
Yep, there's no further questions at the moment, Alan.
Excellent. Okay, just a final rundown now. So we've kind of built an organization purpose. We're operating well. We've got infrastructure. We've built our capability out through an ecosystem. We're engaging with technology to make that frictionless and much easier to work with. The final thing is back to people. People will perform, people will engage, people will contribute their very best if they feel they're learning and taking on what we call mastery. They're getting better at what they do, and they can measure that progress in practical terms. They have autonomy in what they take on and feel like they have choices in what they're doing. Okay, so that's what a definition of a learning organization is. Okay, now this was a term coined by Peter Senge in the 1980s and through a book called The Fifth Discipline. Big, thick term. I wouldn't recommend you read it, but it is a fascinating read in what we're doing. And he took this process into the obviously corporate world. But the key thing is that it was being fluent with experimentation and innovation, doing things up to the point where if testing failure, learn from that, repeat, and take them forward. Again, it's not something the veterinary mindset is particularly engaged with. We have a process we put into practice called continuous learning or continuous innovation. And it's about looking at systems, saying, what doesn't work here? What can we improve? And it's actually looking at systems, not people, systems, and how can we support and adapt and reinvent systems on a continuous, faster basis. And that has worked well in a lot of the practice, and it's going to be an absolutely necessary piece as we go. So, but the prerequisite for this is a mindset. It's not a system. This is a mindset shift. And a lot of people, if you're on this call, you're probably here already, but you're here because of a growth mindset. I can grow and I can learn, I can take on new stuff, and if I fail, it's because, and I can take lessons from that. It's curiosity. I think the most underrated attribute in any human being is curiosity. It frees up the human interaction so much, and an openness to experimentation and failure. Okay, and that's not something we carry well in the veterinary profession. But if you can do that within bounds, within capability, it works well. Putting people at the center of your business means that you are focused on their personal and professional growth and improvement. Okay, so we grow fully productive human beings first, and then we get them to do some veterinary medicine on the side. It's kind of the way we're approaching this. Okay, your responsibility in the business is to grow people that can do a job. Okay, because the job is mostly skills. The capability of doing the job is mostly a personal and professional growth activity. Okay, so learning organizations, you've got to give people the opportunity to engage in learning. Okay, so how do you do that? Sending people off to do a couple of days of CPD is nice. To send them to a hotel with a swimming pool and meet some other people and get drunk at the bar is great. Okay, certainly. But what I'm suggesting is, how do we bring that learning environment back to the practice? Because once you're back to the practice, get back to work and just do stuff. Okay, it's not about learning, it's about doing. And what I would suggest, we need to free up the space. Google had this famous 20% time. It's actually down to about a 10% time now. But they would say every Friday, people are free to work on any project they like within Google. 3M, chemical company, invented post-it notes in the same vein, that they had a 20% time, and then people came up with all sorts. With Google, most of their best innovations actually came out of 20% time rather than any specific development roadmap that they had. Now, I'm not saying you give everyone Friday off to do what they like, because that probably wouldn't work in practice. But what I'm saying is there some forum for feeding information in, getting feedback on it, saying what if, and can we do this? And so, like I said, we've got systems like the CI board, like the planning board. This one's been co-opted for a wellness board. It's how do we learn? What do we got to learn? What things are working on it? What other things can we do? And it's a specific amount of time in the practice set aside purely to discuss these sorts of things and have these ideas and discussions. And it's not run by the practice owner or the practice manager. It's run by the team, for the team, by the team. And it works remarkably well in practices that are doing this sort of stuff. Another thing I will put out there, we have always had our Vet Graduate Academy for our members. It's been a personal and professional skill set development, mindset planning, energy, time management, personal, interpersonal performance, assertiveness, commercial, finance, etc. We've now joined that with Central CPD, and we've added on that a follow-on of practical year one proficiencies and capabilities for new grads through practical courses, case studies, on-demand videos, also it's a lovely one-year program for independent practices, because this is where you're challenged with the corporates. They have massive graduate academies. Not sure how good they are, but they seem to have them. Graduates are very much attracted to those. What we'd like to do is offer independent practices out there that this is your graduate academy that you can actually have places on, put your graduates through and work through. So if you want some more information on that, certainly come to our Vet Dynamics website or Central CPD. It's still in the formation stage. First one's opening in April this year. If that's of interest, get in touch and let us know. But this is fulfilling that learning organization, because what we're embedding in these graduates is what they take back into practice to act on and renew. So that we're really quite pleased and proud of that at the moment. Okay, that's kind of where we got to. So we've kind of covered this territory. we looked at identity, who we are, through purpose, value, agenda, and culture. If you need to revisit that, certainly go and look at the video. We've looked at how we operate, okay, through flattening the structure, improving decision making, and then treating talent as the most important part of your business. And now we've sort of discussed, well, there are ways to grow, and we grow rather than organically or transactionally or piece by piece. We can grow exponentially through ecosystems. And then the data we have from those ecosystems, we need some way of managing that, and then putting that into a learning, review, feedback process. And that's kind of it. Simple, hey, what could possibly go wrong? So there's structure in there. If you're going to approach this, maybe take the piece that's important, and there is an order. Get that identity right first. Improve your operations seconds. Think about growth third. There is sort of a tangible line to go with that. So if you're going to do something with this, a couple of things I just put out there. One, there is no new normal. I don't actually like that term particularly. It's self-defeating in its own way. There is a new, but it's certainly not going to be normal. Okay, so don't ever settle for complacency around, well, we're back to, because it's just not going to happen. Okay, constant reinvention is, unfortunately for some of us, or fortunately for the rest of us, that's exactly what's going to happen. Okay, life has been upended, life will not be the same again, and the profession has come out of this really quite badly, and we need to actually have that rebuild process. There is pain, there's grief and economic dislocation. There's long COVID in terms of its physical illness, but there's long COVID in its commercial and economic situation as well. This will have long-term things. So what we're suggesting as leaders, as business owners, focus on the people. People respond to empathy and compassion, and this is about revitalizing, re-energizing your exhausted teams and getting them back to front, and then building on that from a growth perspective as we go. So what we've described here is really a process, a system, and it's by no means complete, and it's by no means right, and we're actually testing a lot of this stuff as we speak in the real world. But really what we're asking of people is levels of flexibility, integration, resilience, and just being human. Just keep humans at the core of what you're doing, is what we want to do. And that is probably the hardest thing to do. What will make that easier is thinking about interconnected systems that you can tap into that will allow you in a safe space to experiment, to maybe fail, or learn where other people have failed, to learn what they've done that actually worked, and then to grow from that point. And then take on the world as you need to do that. Now, to help with that, we've sort of developed a model around this and other ways of working that we're working on now in the Vet Dynamics community to rebuild practices around equity and ownership, ecosystems of governance, learning organization, personal development at the core of the business. And these are sort of structural things we need to build. We know there's certain psychological conditions that need to be in place for people to perform at their best. That's psychological and physiological safety. There's belonging and community, and the born of that, and then self-esteem, self-worth issues as well, which are psychological constructs that need systems put into it. And then we have a process of liberating people's talent. When they feel safe, they can get into flow, they can trust each other, they can work on legacy and purpose and autonomy and mastery and continue and grow. And then that's within this scope of continuous learning. We need to work on diversity, inclusivity, and then obviously ecological sustainability are the other pieces we need to build. So we have a model, we're working on this, we're implementing it, we're playing with, experimenting with this deeply through our groups at the moment. So all I'd say is if people are interested in looking into that, we do have an event in 2 weeks' time. It's a virtual event online, 9:30 till 1 o'clock. We're going to walk through that business model and give you an experience of what that is involved. If people want to come on that, it's £97. But for people on this webinar, if you put in a discount code of VisioCare, you'll get that at £47. So would it highly encourage anyone who has any degree of curiosity around how we're going to do this for the future, I'd suggest you come along and do that. The point of that process, I'll be upfront about it, we want people to join us on that journey. And the best way we can help people go on that journey with their businesses to rebuild, re-engage and reinvigorate the veterinary profession overall is come along to one of our Platinum Academies. So that's where I'll leave it, Nikki, and I'll open it up to any comments, questions, or information from yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alan. Just waiting to see if anybody's got any questions. We'd love you to get involved. If there's anything that's sprung to mind that you'd like to ask Alan, then feel free to pop your comments in the chat box on the right-hand side there.
Sounds like I've convinced everybody, Nikki. So.
Yeah, you made that sound so simple, Alan. There we go. Fabulous work. I love the idea that everything just sort of boils down to empathy and compassion, you know, and that if we can sort of nurture our team, then everything can grow from there. Really a very solid message there. Lovely Danielle just says thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Danielle.
Before everybody goes, actually, this evening, I wanted to definitely say a big, massive thank you to you, Alan, for your pioneering viewpoint on team structures in vet practice. Really very special, and specifically for highlighting the benefits of technology to support the teams. I would like to share with you a quick short video about VisioCare Consult. So let me just play that for you guys now before
let me stop the slide presentation. There we go.
Wonderful. Thanks,
That's
everybody.
Excellent, Nikki. And as I keep saying, VisioCare Consult's one of my favourite teaching bits of software, and we're embedding that into the Harper Keele University from day one.
Super, that's wonderful. Well, everybody's been very complimentary, and lots of big thanks to everybody that's joined us and taken some time out of their evening to be with us this evening, and we hope to see you all again very soon. And thanks again, Alan, for joining us. I don't think there's any other questions at this stage, which is surprising.
Well, if people need to get in touch, they find me at Vet Dynamics.
Perfect. All right, guys, we'll have a lovely evening and we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much. Take care now.